my lovely law enthusiast humans, in particular FCA. Are you filming back-to-back videos because this is when you have time? Yes, that is exactly what is happening. So what I want to discuss today is defense attorneys, what they do, what their purpose is, strategies, what they are required and not required to do, what they do and do not have to do, and like their just general being in the American justice system. There's a lot of confusion, misconceptions, and I want to dispel some issues that we might have with defense attorneys in particular. Let's get into it. The first thing that is vital to understand with defense attorneys is arrest does not equal guilt. Get this through your head, spread it to your friends and family. Just because somebody is arrested does not mean they are guilty, all right? Arrest does not equal guilt. Does not. People are arrested out of convenience. People are arrested because like they're the spouse, because they were somebody's roommate. Convenience is usually the culprit of an arrest because law enforcement, okay, police officers in particular, they are not the finders of evidence. They can take some photos and bring in some things. They do some initial interviews, but it's actually detectives, forensics that actually do the evidence part of things, and they're trying to assess the scene. Like if there's somebody hurt or like a child missing or something like that going on, law enforcement do not have time to determine guilt. It's just, oh, you're here, arrest is how that normally goes. So arrest does not equal guilt. Vital to remember. The second thing that's important to remember is everybody deserves zealous advocacy. And this is very morally frustrating to people in our justice system, which I understand has its problems. It's not perfect by any means. But we have a system that is designed to protect a defendant. That way they have to be proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, note that term reasonable doubt. We're going to touch on it in a second. But this is frustrating for people because when the outside views a particular person as a monster, so we think Diddy, Jen Shaw comes to mind, people who do crimes against children, against animals, against the elderly. We see these people in a very, very negative light, and we want to see them go to jail and get justice. We want to see them put away out of society for a long time. That's what we want. And we also, on the outside, we feel bad for the victims and their families, and we want justice for them. So when we see the defendant as a monster who hurt all these other people, that's what we think our justice system should be doing. But in reality, our justice system is there to protect this defendant because they're the person whose possible life is on the line, their freedom is on the line. And so we want to make sure we get the right person. Does that work out all the time? Absolutely not. But it is one of the, I know this is hard for us, but it is one of the better systems for this because we have the Constitution and we have a bunch of constitutional rights and protections. And when you're in court, the defense attorney's job is not to defend their client's actions. So let's talk about that. People get confused when you hear defense attorney. It's not, a defense attorney is not there to prove innocence. That is not what a defense attorney does. We think that's what a defense attorney does because we see prosecutors and defense attorneys as opposition. So the prosecution is trying to prove this defendant guilty, and so we think it's very logical for us to go, okay, well, since the prosecution is trying to do this, the defense is defending the client. No, they are not defending the client. They don't have to prove innocence. They don't have to prove an alibi. They don't have to prove anything. They don't have to bring a case. The defense does not have to bring a case. In criminal law, speaking strictly criminal, the prosecutors have to be able to convince a panel of jurors, the jury, from this defendant is not guilty until proven innocent. So the prosecution has to turn that dial to guilt beyond reasonable doubt. Now, when we say that, we don't mean all doubt, because you know what? It's like, well, this person is not guilty because aliens came down, beamed this person up, and put a doppelganger in the spot, and the doppelganger committed the crime, and then the aliens switched them back. So this being didn't do this. So if you want to say, so I have doubt, because that could happen. We don't know that it doesn't happen. In the court of law, that's not going to fly. It's beyond reasonable doubt. What would a reasonable person come to the conclusion of? Is the evidence presented strong enough? Are the witnesses credible, etc.? And then the jurors put that all together, and they get to decide if they were convinced of the prosecution or not. The defense does not have to make a case. They do not have to defend the client. They are defending constitutional rights. That is what a defense attorney does. They defend constitutional rights, which everyone has, even the monsters, which is frustrating for us, right? We don't want somebody who hurts children, who has committed horrendous crimes. We don't want those people protected. But in the court of law, when they're the defendant, they're the person who's facing charges, the defense attorney is there to protect their constitutional rights. They are there to make sure that the government doesn't overreach, overstep, or go too far because of that. So defense attorneys are not defending their clients' actions, okay? The defense attorneys, you'll notice that they don't often say, this person didn't do it. They can't prove that this person did it. Their job is to poke holes in whatever case the prosecution gives. So yeah, they're going to say things that try to make their witnesses look bad, that discredit evidence, that discredit how evidence came in, try to limit certain evidence and testimony from coming in, because their job, because if the prosecution has a strong enough case, then no matter what a defense attorney does, this is the prosecution's point, is they want to have a strong enough case that no matter what the defense tries to do, their case is going to be strong. So that you don't want this witness to talk, okay, our case is still strong. We still have all this other evidence for this thing. Defense attorneys are there to poke holes. So the prosecution brings on a witness and the defense goes, were you sober that day? It's like, well, I was drinking. Okay, so you don't know. Like, you just think, you know, I mean, I was drinking, I wasn't drunk. That's not what I asked you. And that's where defense attorneys really happen. They ask these yes or no questions, or they ask certain leading questions that put the person in a corner. They're there to make the prosecution's case look bad enough to reduce whatever's happening to their defendant. Now, also, and some people were like, well, how can you be a defense attorney? How can you be a good person and defend somebody you know is guilty? Okay, first of all, let's tackle that. Let's not assume that a bad person tells their lawyer the truth, okay? People, even when they are guilty, they will say they're not guilty to their lawyer, to the defense attorney, okay? And let me tell you what defense attorneys will do. If they're like, listen, you didn't wear a mask and you robbed this place, and your name is tattooed across the middle of your face. You have a very distinguishing tattoo of your name, and they have a 4K video of you committing this crime. You're guilty. I didn't do it. That's not me. It is you, and there is no jury on this planet who think it's not you. And that's where we get plea deals from, okay? If you've ever wondered how people do different pleas. Like if they weren't guilty, why did they settle out? One, because they don't want to pay costs. The costs are just too expensive to go through the court system, so they settle it just to get out of the way. So settlement doesn't equal guilt all the time either. It's just that it's cheaper to pay a settlement than it is to drag things out through court to try to prove what might be a moot point. So defense attorneys will tell somebody, you're guilty, you're going to get found guilty, take this plea deal. You are getting a better deal with this plea deal than if you try to go to court, because you are going to be found guilty, and then the punishment's going to be a lot worse. And defense attorneys will tell their clients that, and the clients get to make the decision if they're like, yeah, I'll take the plea deal, or, you know, and they'll say, there's overwhelming evidence that cannot be thrown out. Like, you're going to get found guilty. Defense attorneys will tell clients that. But what defense attorneys will do is they'll say, we'll try to get this time off. We can try to get you in for good behavior. We can try to aim for some community service for lesser jail time. These are negotiations. Defense attorneys often are negotiators to lessen a sentence, that because again, sometimes they're like, you're going to be found guilty. Okay, you did this. There's no way around it. I'm going to try to get you the least amount of time possible, because they're getting paid to do that. That's their job, is to defend constitutional rights and to make sure that governments don't overstep. Okay, they don't want every person to be an example. All right? So that's what defense attorneys do. They're not there to defend a client's actions. They're not there to prove a client innocent. In a courtroom, the defense doesn't have to bring witnesses. They don't have to bring evidence. They don't have to do anything. You know, the prosecution presents their case and the defense goes, and we rest. And that's it. There's nothing else that happens. They don't have to bring a case. And jurors are always told this because of the misconception. It's like, well, they don't even have a case. So like, they're not even trying to defend him. They know he's guilty. They don't have to prove anything. They're not required to prove anything. If they do have a good case, okay, if defense attorneys are like, no, we have alibis, we have witnesses and cell phone records, etc., that say that this person was over here and had no connection to what was happening, then they can put on a case if they actually have it. And both sides are required to turn over evidence to each other. So if the prosecution gets a new piece of evidence or does a new deposition, which is where they have an interview, court-style interview with a person, they ask questions just on their own, then they get to do stuff. And they have to turn all of that over to the other side. Defense attorneys have to do that too. If they're like, hey, we got evidence of this person was like nowhere near the crime, this wasn't them, whatever, they'll turn that over. And sometimes that's how cases get dropped, is because the defense doesn't always put on a case, because if they get strong enough evidence to counter a prosecution's case, like an alibi situation. The reason why we don't see alibi very often in the courtroom in streams is because when there is alibi evidence, the prosecution just won't go with it. They won't continue the case. They'll just drop the charges against that person, because they're like, oh, there's no way I can win this case now because this person has all this evidence that shows that they had an alibi. Okay, well then obviously it's not this person. And so there's no point in going to charges. They're not going to waste, the prosecution tries not to waste their time on a case they don't think they can win. The government usually goes with cases that they are sealed deals. When evidence comes up that proves the innocence of a person, it just usually doesn't go to court. We just don't normally get there. 9 times out of 10, the prosecutors win the case, and the defense is left with just trying to mitigate how much punishment their client is getting and to ensure that they are protected. Zealous advocacy is deserved by everybody, okay? Because if you get arrested and you don't think you did something wrong, do you want people to go, throw the book at them? We don't need a jury. No, you don't want that for you. You wouldn't want that for your loved one. And so even the people who are bad, the people who we see do bad things, like we're like Diddy, for instance, we want the justice. But you want the justice to the right person, and we don't want the government, as they try to do so often, to overstep their boundaries and to make the punishment outweigh the crime. We don't want that. So we need defense attorneys because everyone deserves somebody who can understand legalese. And the reason why it's a bad idea to defend yourself is because there are court proceedings, there are court rules, and like there's the whole dictionary that I showed you that I got of legal definitions and procedures that non-trained people don't know and don't understand. And sometimes you could have evidence that defends you, but if you don't know how to put it in right, it doesn't come in. And then you're screwed. You're like, but this evidence like proves it wasn't me. That's great. You didn't put it in right. It wasn't delivered in the right way, so it's not going to come in. Now, is that stupid to us on the outside? Yes, but there's a process and a procedure because that also protects you so that the prosecution can't just pull evidence out of their butt, or police can't go, actually we found this piece of evidence. And it's like, here's this piece of evidence, and just throw it at the jury. That's not how that happens. And this is also why you would only get surprise witnesses in TV court. There isn't surprises to prosecution or defense in criminal trials. They always know what's coming up, and so they can strategize around it. It's a part of the court procedure. So, takeaways again. Arrest does not equal guilt. Everyone deserves zealous advocacy. Everyone deserves somebody who understands legal proceedings to protect them. Defense attorneys do not protect a person's actions. They are not defending actions or proving innocence. Defense does not prove anything. They are protecting constitutional rights and mitigating punishment. That is what they are doing. So we just wanted to clear that up as we go into getting into court trial. And people were like, well, we know they're guilty. Arrest doesn't equal guilt, and just whatever comes out doesn't equal guilt either. It depends on how it comes in, how it's portrayed, if it was gotten correctly. And sometimes defense attorneys do have evidence that they're going to try, because when they do put on a case, they want to make the prosecution look bad. Again, they're trying to stop that needle from moving from not guilty, from presumed innocence to guilt. They want to keep it away from reasonable doubt. They're like, well, they could have done it, but they also could not have done it. And most courtrooms will tell jurors that they have to find in favor of a defendant. If it could be both ways, you're supposed to lean in favor of the defendant because you were not persuaded beyond a reasonable doubt. Since you're not persuaded beyond a reasonable doubt, that means you lean towards the defendant. So just want to clear those things up, and I will see you when we do some court cases. Bye, my lovely humans.